Hello everyone, today we are taking a look at the TinyApe from DarwinFPV. This one only comes in an HD version like the 03 unit that I have here. It also comes in Avatar, and then you go with the analog as well. So no HD0 on this one. I do know that a few of my counterparts a couple of weeks ago, right out of the box, they had some issues. So I'll try to cover those things because I had a little bit of a different experience. But something else that you should also be aware of is I think we need to see a V2 right away. Obviously, I got the version where you put in your own 03 and it has these upright plates. Looks like a dog to me, but maybe it's a rabbit or some other sort of short-nosed animal. The all-in-one flight controller right here is the DarwinFPV F411. It has a 15 amp ESC, and it also has Express LRS, which is this antenna down here, built right into the board. USB port is right down here. Got 1103 8000 kV motors, and on those motors are the Gemfan 2512 tri-bladed props. 3D prints hold our antenna as well as our 03 unit. I suspect they're slightly different for the Avatar version, and the analog version probably has the VTX just down here on top of the board. It weighs 92.64 grams. I did fly it with these different batteries. With the Cotter 530, it weighs 135.69 grams. With the G&B 530, it weighs 131.18 grams. With the G&B 520, it weighs 135.39 grams. With the 660 milliamp G&B, it weighs 141.74 grams. Of course, with using rubber bands for holding our battery on, you can run it either way. I found that we have these little notches in here, and I like to toilet tank my battery. I just like that flight feel a little bit different. So I did that. You could also hook it, and it hooks much easier on these outside hooks as well. But if you go real heavy and you're flying aggressively, you're probably going to have battery disconnects because the battery will eject. I had that happen even on the batteries that I have tested here. So something to be aware of. And with that, you definitely need to secure the zip tie down on some portion of the carbon or something like that. It doesn't have to be super tight, but you just want to create a little wrinkle between your zip tie and your flight controller. So it does pull, and it doesn't pull hard on your flight controller. And they do include zip ties, but they do not do this for you. You need to do this out of the box. It does come with an accessory bag, which you can see some of the extra spare zip ties, some antenna tubes, some extra rubber bands. We've got 2 stickers and a support card in there. It also comes with some screws that you'll need for mounting an 03, as well as some general repair screws that they have in here. And it did come with an extra set of props, but I've kind of already beat up all those other props. Upright carbon fiber is 1.5 millimeters thick. Bottom plate is 2 millimeters thick. The thickest arm looks to be almost 5 millimeters thick, with the thinner arm being a little over 3 millimeters thick. Hard for you to see because I can't get my calipers down, but it looks like 111, almost 112 millimeters. That was motor post to motor post. Okay, so first up, we're gonna do my favorite sort of flying, which is cruisy, racy, freestyle, just kind of having fun in the backyard flying. I did put together a short crash reel, just kind of picking out the easy crashes. And my flight time with this did end with a crash because I had some damage, and we'll show that after the review, or after the flights, excuse me. I do think I have my camera angle a little bit higher than I normally do because I was certainly feeling some extra speed here in aggression. So one of the things that I kind of noticed was, and we'll see it in this flight video, especially as I do this punch out up of the chimney, that it kind of pushes me out over the yard. Yeah, I think they've got the motor idle too high. That was something that I was going to tinker with, but unfortunately with the crash and the damage, I could not continue to fly it. You see that as we do some of the harder turns, it doesn't handle the prop wash necessarily very well. And again, I punch out over the house, even at 0 throttle with the motor idle, which is at the default, just because I think the prop size with the weight of the quad is pushing me out over the yard because that idle is just a little bit high. It doesn't handle the prop wash all that well, but it's not untuned, and I'll show you the tune as we get into it. Also experienced where you would do a battery plug-in and the DJI-03 would link up. You know, you kind of have to wait for that. And then I would get, I'd try to arm, and it would say calibrate, or not the full word calibrate. I think it just says C-A-L-R-B-R-I, something like that. So it's waiting for the gyro to finish its calibration so you can arm and take off and fly. So that was a bit interesting, and I did get around to tinkering with the gyro calibration or noise setting on Betaflight, and it was at stock, which I believe is 48, and I changed it to 75, which calms that down and actually allows you to arm relatively quickly after your DJI-03 links up. So this kind of, along with a few other things, kind of makes me feel like this was rushed off the manufacturing line. That maybe they needed to spend more time internally refining the PID tune, noticing this gyro sensor calibration issue so they could correct that, because they're not huge issues, but they're issues that still, I think at this day and age, we as consumers expect the manufacturers to work out. It used to be back in the early days, say 2018, 2017, maybe into 2019, where manufacturers didn't send out quads with PID tunes at all, and it was a nightmare. That was one of the values you got from reviews, was we'd spend time on the PID tune. But that flight ended at 2:37. Let's go into some slower flights. So we're going to jump in to some slow flight. This is where I did a lot of battery testing with flight time. I think the footage is relatively smooth, but I do think improvements in the PID tune can be made, and it can help smooth out the footage a little bit. You know, the camera's hard mounted, so the PID tune needs to be relatively good. We need to have some nice smooth running motors on this as well. To just give you some flight time info, with the 650, these are 3S batteries, I got around 7 minutes and 10 seconds. 720, about 7 minutes and 50 seconds. 660, I got 6 minutes and 50 seconds. 550, 6 minutes and 10 seconds. 530, 4 minutes and 50 seconds, but that was, I noted that was a really old battery, had lots of flights on it. Faster flight on a 450, I got 2 minutes and 30 seconds, kind of what we've already seen. 530, I actually got 2 minutes and 40 seconds, so only about 10 seconds more. You might get, all these times are going to average and vary out, because if you've got nice fresh batteries without many cycles on them, you'll probably get more flight time, more performance. Faster flight 660 got 3 minutes and 20 seconds, although I did not care for the extra weight, because every time I crashed with that 660 I had a battery ejection, so I had to look all over the yard for this. But those are some flight times I can report. And as I look at the batteries here, I actually showed you a 2S battery on those weights, so if you see that, you might be calling that out in the comments section, and while I appreciate that, I just made a slight error there. I apologize for that. So the 550 that I showed you there in the weight is inaccurate. First thing I want to show you, now that the flights are all done, is the PID tune. Mine did come with the custom PID tune, although, like I said, I think it needs some more tweaking. You could take a look at this just for comparison purposes with maybe my counterparts. I can't remember if I saw it or if someone sent me an image, if they showed that the sliders were all lined up right down the center or not. I'm sorry, I can't remember. That's been too many days ago. I did change the motor poles to where they would match up with a micro motor, because they came with 14, needed to be 12. And then eventually, after a series of flights and dealing with the frustration of the gyro calibration, I did change the gyro calibration noise filter, and I changed mine to 75, and that seemed to put me in a position to where I could plug in, the DJI would link up, and then I could pretty much arm and go. I didn't really have to wait, versus previously I might have to wait 30 to 45 seconds after the DJI linked up and I'd started the recording before I could arm and fly away without getting that calibration error, because that will stop you from arming. So obviously I already told you about all the props that I went through in the flight testing, and also the crash reel. Again, this is a brief crash reel, just the easy ones to pick out at the end of flights. Obviously I have a very severely turned down prop. We have motors that do not have motor screws, and the props stayed on for me, and they stayed on and took a beating, so that's really not much of a concern. I do like to have the option of using screws as well, maybe have some mismolded props or something like that, and they tend to fly off or something like that. Then you can use screws in all cases in order to get around that. But there's one issue why I won't be able to revisit this if they do. Maybe they come out with a custom PID tune or something like that, and that is, whoop, I broke it. As you can see, I broke the motor stem off right inside there. I've even got some dirt around the motor stator here, but yeah, if you wanted to look at the motor here, let me see if I can get the camera to focus. Broke the stem off, and oddly enough, the prop doesn't look too worse for the wear or anything, and on the same crash, that prop got turned down completely, and that motor, I think it's fine. At least it doesn't fall off like this one does. And as you can see from the bottom, it does have 2 holes on either side of the motor, so there is an opportunity to put prop screws through there. But yeah, so if I'm going to revisit this, I'm going to need another motor. And I think there's quite a bit of potential here. Specifically, I would like to see them offer an HD0 version as well as a light version. I do think that they probably have to modify, either create some 3D spacers for cameras in either one of those cases, as well as giving us additional options to decase our O3. I think they're a little bit more narrow because I think it is a lot of fun possibilities with this and doing something light without all the metal casing of the O3, or HD0, which is natively lighter. Avatar is going to be natively lighter. So I presume if you order Avatar, your mounting in here is slightly different. Now, I didn't find this too bad to work with. I don't know why. I think it's mainly because I'd been doing so many Cinewhoops and adding these adding the O3s in, and it's just such a tedious pain to be adding in O3s on Cinewhoops. So when I got this one, it was a little bit refreshing. Essentially, and not that you need to know this, you take out the screws on these metal standoffs that are kind of our horizontal support, slide these off. I then put these 3D print pieces around my O3 after I'd removed the screws necessary, because you use the long screws that they include in the kit. And then I put the plastic pieces on here, of course, mounted my antenna, and then I mounted it to one side, and then I put that one side back on. I made sure that I had my cabling, which does come pre-wired off the flight controller, routed out back, and then I put on the other side and just kind of screwed everything down. And it wasn't too bad. It was much easier than working on something like a Cinewhoop of some sort. I did add some heat shrink and a zip tie down here. You can see my zip tie comes off of here. I just didn't want this antenna flapping around, so I made sure I had a little bend in my antenna down here, so if it did, catch on something, I've got a little bit of play before it actually tugs on my UFL off the flight controller. But I did add this heat shrink just because I didn't want it flopping around. I don't know if it flopping around would actually get in the prop line or not. I just saw that as a potential possibility. You wouldn't have to necessarily use heat shrink and have a heat gun. You could just use the zip ties they include in the kit and a little bit of tape around that. That would do the job as well. Only this part sticking out really matters as far as your reception goes, and Express LRS works so dang well. It's really it's a non-issue when it comes to our control link on Express LRS. So I think there's a lot of potential. Not that I am some sort of, know-it-all or anything like that. That's not taking a jab at JB's moniker or anything like that. But personally, I would like to see them come out with a second iteration to where we could go lighter with the O3, just some prints. We need them to tighten up the tune, obviously, to where we get a little bit smoother flat flight and some better flight characteristics. Decreasing the motor idle, I think, would be another thing that I've mentioned a couple times in this video that would keep it from pushing me out over the yard. Like when you do a dive, the last thing you want is zero throttle to be drawing you out away from the object you're doing the dive from, or if just your line. And if you're at zero throttle, it could be the PID tune as well. I would concede that, but I think it's motor idle because you can hear the prop spinning up as you come down. And even if you're kind of coming at an angle, sorry, that's out of frame. Even if you're coming at an angle, so you're not coming straight down yet, like when I'd punch out over the house, you could feel it pushing me out over to the yard. And then when you start coming straight down, it would really, start to push me out over the yard. So I think motor idle needs to be sorted out. I think they just need to revisit the Betaflight configuration, and I'd like to see us give us some options to where we could go naked, although I have been flying a naked O3 this summer in the heat, and it's problematic, at least when the heat's in the mid-90s, of flying battery after battery. Maybe it's just me and I'm not quick enough as far as swapping batteries out and getting up in the air, but I have found that it would thermal shut down on me, so I would have to take it inside and let it cool for a while. Maybe a couple minutes, 2-3 minutes might do the trick before I go back outside. But I just like the flight feel of additional performance when we decrease our weight. I think the O3 props, or the O3 motors, handle the props just fine, at least in my situation here for my flight style. I wouldn't suggest going to a necessarily bigger motor, because then I worry about the carbon fiber thickness and having that motor weight out on the end of the arm. Could that somehow decrease the durability? I would just like to see them revisit the Betaflight configuration, give us some 3D print options to running a naked O3 setup, and an HD0 version as well. And I would need another motor so that I could revisit anything they might be doing with this. But I guess if I need to, I'll just run out and buy one. So I think there's potential, but with the issues that I found and some of my counterparts found, I think it's pretty tough to be going out and purchasing this right away. We need to see either they're making improvements in the Betaflight configuration at the very least, and then we can revisit this, or just a V2 version where they have the other options that I mentioned, or other options that they already have in mind. I think there's a lot of potential in it. It's just tough if you compare this to other things in the market, specifically with the Betaflight configuration, that you would want to go out and get this unless you like to do your own sort of PID tuning and filtering and stuff like that. Then maybe if you just want to buy a ready to fly quad and you want to tinker with the PID tune to see what you can make of it. But I think for most people out of the market, it's going to be one of those things where at the very least you're going to have to change the motor poles for the motor setup in Betaflight, and you may have to also change the gyro calibration. I don't know if that's a wide known issue. Oh, I did hear also that, oh shoot, someone had this, the battery lead got soldered on backwards. That was not the case with mine. Whenever I get a quad, I just take a battery and I just kind of size it up to make sure the round part's the round part, and then I look at the wires to make sure that, oh yeah, okay, everything's fine. I think I've always done that for all these years. So it's just part of my initial out-of-box experience is to just check that. So, you know, if that I didn't have that issue. That's the last thing I could say is I didn't have that issue. I had the other issues, and then I did make some changes in my flight process, but I did not change the PIDs or the filter. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. TinyApe from Beta FPV. That's not even it.